Hi, good evening. Tributaries of Eden for Parshas Balak. Looking at Chumash on page 866, we have an interesting pasuk where Bilam is supposed to be, at least he was invited to do so, cursing the Jews. Instead, he blesses the Jews. In fact, he says, how can I curse them? God won't curse them. I look down, ki merosh tzurim arenu. I look down from the tops of the mountains, which we say refers to the Jewish people's history, and there just is no way to curse them. And then he says at the top of page 866, Mi mana afar Yaakov. Who can count all the dust of Yaakov? Umispar esrova Yisrael. Who can even count the quarter of the Jewish people or the descendants of the Jewish people? And then Bilam makes this very interesting statement, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. He has a little prayer. He says, Tamos nafshi mos yesharim. May my soul die the death of the upright. Usihi achrisi kamayu. May my end be like theirs. So this is a tefillah of sorts, a request, inserted into the blessings of Bilam, where he asks to die, mos yesharim, the death of the upright. Now, what is he asking for? What exactly does he want? So, the Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin, and we're going to come back to the pasuk soon, but the Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin, when it discusses Bilam, says, referring to the Mishnah says, Kol Yisrael yesh lam chelek olam haba. Every Jew has a portion in the world to come. And there's many songs written about that line, Kol Yisrael yesh lam chelek olam haba. Except the songs don't include the next line, which says, Ve'elu, and these are those she'ein lam chelek olam haba, who don't have a portion in the world to come. Here's the list, and the Mishnah gives us a list of certain transgressions for which you have no portion in the world to come, which is not our topic. And then the Mishnah says that there are 7 individuals who have no portion in the world to come. Shlosha malachim v'arba hadyotos, 3 kings and 4 commoners have no portion in the world to come. The 3 kings are Yeravam, Achav, and Menashe. And the 4 commoners are Bilam, Doeg, Achitophel, and Gehazi, or some say Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, Achitophel, Bilam, Gehazi, Doeg. It just depends on whether you go in chronological order or alphabetical order. But Bilam is one of the 7 people who has no portion in the world to come. Says the Gemara, Bilam has no portion in the world to come? He's not a Jew. So the Gemara says that this is dependent on the famous machlokas. And the Rambam paskins that Chasidei Umos Ha'olam, that the righteous of the Gentiles, do have a portion in the world to come. So that's why we're told that Bilam, even though he is, even though we might have assumed that, as some commentaries say, that he's a prophet, you might have assumed that that means he has some portion in the world to come, so that's why we say no. That Bilam has no portion in the world to come, that's why he's counted amongst these 7. To which the Gemara adds this one line. V'af oso rasha nasan siman ba'atzmo. That this wicked one, Bilam, made a sign for himself. Amar, he said, Tamos nafshi mos yesharim. May my death be a death of the upright, meaning like this. Im tamos nafshi mos yesharim, if he, Bilam, will die the way of the upright, meaning he will die of old age. Tehei achrisi kamahu, that's a sign that God has accepted him as one of the righteous of the nations of the world, and then everyone should know that he is going to have a portion in the world to come. Ve'im lav, but if not, if Bilam does not die a natural death, hineni holech la'ami, then he's going with his people, meaning then he's not going to Gan Eden. So what the Gemara is telling us is that this line, Tamus Nafshi Mos Yishar, may my death be the death of the upright, is actually Bilam forwarding a little divination on his part, saying that if you want to know what his end is going to be, it's going to depend. If he dies a natural death, then that means that God has accepted him as a righteous person, and he's going to have a portion in the world to come. If he dies an unnatural death, then that's a sign that he was rejected and he has no portion in the world to come. And as we know, Bilam does die an unnatural death. He dies in Parshas Matos during the war with Midian, because he was back collecting the money for the 24,000. So because of that, he dies an unnatural death, which is why Bilam is counted amongst those who have no portion in the world to come.
How does Mos Yesharim come to be a natural death? I mean, that sounds like the death of the upright, like how a tzaddik would die, which tzaddikim can die unnatural deaths. We know that with the 10 martyrs.
Yeah, that's a good question, which we'll answer that in just a minute. But that's the question that has to be asked, which is that explains Tamus Nafshi Mos, and even will explain the next line, Sehi Achrisi Kamohu, my end should be like them. But the word Yesharim is a difficult word to explain. So you have to hook this up with another Gemara in Avodah Zarah. There, the Gemara is explaining the word Yesharim in general, and the Gemara says, Yesharim Elu Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's what the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says. And Rashi explains, because Rashi in Avodah Zarah explains, that by Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, it says Vayigva. Vayigva means that they expired. Like they lived their entire lives, and it ended when it needed to end. And so therefore, according to the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, we're going to have to change it a little. It's going to be Tamus Nafshi Mos Yesharim. Rashi explains there that Bilam was asking that he should die the death of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. He should live a long, healthy life until his time comes, and then he should be taken. That's his prayer.
Although I thought Yaakov lost 33 years. Is that still considered?
Right, I mean, they did all, Avraham might have left early too, because Esav started to go bad, but nevertheless, the Torah says Vayigva, which means that they expired, they still died of natural causes. Let's call it that.
Refer to Bereshit as Sefer HaYashar.
Right, so that's exactly why Sefer Bereshit is called Sefer HaYashar, according to this, because it refers to the Yesharim. It's the story of the Avos.
That's the Ramban.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of a chutzpah, huh?
Yeah, that's kind of the question here. What does Bilam think? He's here against the will of Hashem, here to curse the chosen people of God, and he's so inspired in this, he says, gosh, I hope I die like them too. But I don't mean just regular Jews. I want to die like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov died. What is he thinking?
Big dreams.
Right? The Balaturim on this pasuk adds an interesting remez. He says if you take the last letters of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, so Avraham ends with a mem, Yitzchak ends with a kuf, and Yaakov ends with a base. Together, kuf mem base, mem kuf base, is 142, which is the exact numerical value of Bilam. So he says that you can read this verse, Tamus Nafshi Mos Yeshar, may my soul die like the Avos, Usihi Achrisi Kamohu. Achris means like the end or the final letters should allow me somehow to access to be like the Avos. Beautiful premise, but it doesn't answer the question, which is where does Bilam get off thinking that he somehow is on the level to be like the Avos? Where does he get to be in that place? The Ramban, in fact, on this verse, reads the word Yesharim as in, this is what he says. He says that he was asking to have a portion in Gan Eden like the Jewish people who are Yesharim, because, says the Ramban, the Jewish people are referred to as Yeshurun. Vayhi b'Yeshurun Melech. So Yeshurun, it also is a similar word to Yesharim, meaning those who are upright. Yeshur and the straight ones. So the Ramban learns that Bilam is not asking to be like the Avos, but he's asking to be like the Jewish people who are referred to as Yisharim. Eases the question as to where Bilam gets off wanting to be like the Avos, but still makes this problematic as to why does he think he's going to get a portion in the world to come. And this is eventually going to lead us to the question for why we have our sages counting Bilam amongst those who have no portion in the world to come in general. We don't have to list every Gentile that doesn't have a portion in the world to come. So before we go more into that, I want to share with you two explanations that can be found in the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, both of which are standalone points that should allow us some opportunity for thought. The first explanation of the Or HaChaim is he says that when tzaddikim die, there are two levels of tzaddikim. There are the majority of the righteous people who are going to go to Gan Eden. But they have to wait in line. They have to sign lots of documents. They have to deal with paperwork. And then there's some delays, some shipping delays, and all kinds of stuff.
TSA.
Right. In other words, they deserve Gan Eden, but they still have some remnant of sin, and as a result of that, there's delays in the process. And then there are those tzaddikim. Now, he doesn't say they go to Gehenna, he doesn't say they have to go through worlds or anything, he doesn't get into it, but the point is that there's a delay. Then there's some tzaddikim who go straight to Gan Eden. Don't stop, don't pass go, collect $200, just go straight to Gan Eden. He says the Or HaChaim, that's called Mos Yesharim. Those who die and they go straight up to receive the countenance of Hashem. So the first explanation of the Or HaChaim is that Bilam is asking that he wants to die a Mos Yesharim, the death of not just Yesharim, the upright Jewish people, but of the highest level of the tzaddikim who go straight up to face God and bask in the Gan Eden that comes to them.
Is this a bargain he's trying to?
It's very strange. This is exactly the one.
This kind of death, I won't curse the Jewish people. Is that kind of a?
Well, he doesn't. He's not making any conditions. It sounds like, from the simple reading, he's just so inspired when he sees the greatness of the Jewish people that he says, I wish a death like theirs. I wish I could be on their level. I want to die, right? It's like the guy who comes into jail and they put him in his cell and he says, I'll have a ribeye steak with a Diet Coke and are you ordering? What do you think? This is a restaurant? He's like, well, what am I supposed to eat? You'll eat whatever we serve you. Mashed potatoes on a slab. And he's making an order. For what? Who does he think he is? But nevertheless, that's the Or HaChaim reads. Thomas Nafshi Mos Yesharim, that Bilam somehow understands that he is wanting to die Mos Yesharim, the death of the most upright. Or HaChaim has another explanation, but his third explanation is a fascinating one for us. He says, and I'm just going to translate, furthermore, you could suggest that he was asking that on the day of his death, someone should set an alarm clock for him to do teshuvah. He was asking that on the day of his death, he should better his ways from his evil deeds. For he was the most wicked of the world at that time. We're told that his donkey was for him a wife. However, as bad as he was hoping that at the time of his death, he should have the opportunity to repent and at least be like the Yesharim Shebe'umos, like the Chasidei Umos Ha'olam. In other words, Chasidei Umos Ha'olam the righteous of the world have of the nations of the world have a portion in the world to come. So he was hoping to at least be like the Yesharim Shebu'umas Olam. So Tamas Nafshi Mos Yesharim, as according to this explanation of the Chaim, doesn't mean he wants to be like the Jews. Certainly not Avram Avinu. Not even like the righteous who goes straight up. He was just asking that he was hoping to be of the Chasidei Umos Ha'olam. V'yifisha Amad al Mizgo, because he knew himself. And he knew that he was Ra B'tachlis hara, that he was wicked beyond wicked. And he felt that it was withheld from him to do the right thing. Bilam felt that the situation that he was given doesn't allow him to be any better than what he is. So he asked God for a favor. I know I can't do anything to make myself better, but at least in my last moment, let my death be a death with repentance. And I'm going to read this inside because the Orach Chaim is a powerful words. Says the Orach Chaim personally, Ra'isi, I have seen Rishayim, wicked people. She'amruli beferish, they said to me clearly, if they knew that the moment they did tshuva, v'teikif yamusu, and they would immediately die, hayu osim, they would do teshuva. If you came to them 5 minutes before their death and you said to them, you've got 5 minutes left, what are you going to do? They would spend those 5 minutes in the greatest tshuva you can imagine.
But that's a total cop-out.
It is. Absolutely it is.
I mean, that's because I don't want to do the right thing for the next 10 years.
I can't help myself. But that's what they believe. They believe they can't help themselves. Meaning they want to do the right thing. And if they knew that there was an opening, there was some way to do it, they would do it. But unfortunately, they've been left with this package in the world where they can't help themselves. The Orach Chaim writing this a few hundred years ago. I'm not sure what percentage of the world at that point felt that people felt completely helpless to fix themselves. But certainly in our world, this is my nature. It's the way I was made. This is, my upbringing. One of my teachers looked at me funny when I was a child. All these reasons that people give. He says, they just know that if they're given more than 5 minutes, more than 10 minutes, maybe a few days, they'll sin again. Because upon them is the control of the king, and by that I mean not the good king, but the king, the old man, the fool, meaning the court jester. We know him as Yetzer Hara, but the court jester is in charge of these people. So he says he wasn't asking to die like a Jew, the Orach Chaim is saying that Bilam wasn't asking to die like a Jew. He was asking to die like a righteous Gentile. But Bilam was completely convinced that he was beyond salvation, that the only thing that could save him is decent timing. If he could be, the thing is, maybe that's what he means, you could say Pshat in the Gemara, when Bilam says, if he dies a natural death, then he's going to go to the world to come. But if he doesn't die a natural death, then he won't. So according to this Orach Chaim, you could explain like this. If he was going to die a natural death, he was a diviner enough, he was a prophet enough to know when he was going. So he figured he's got a certain number of years to live, and soon we'll see exactly how many years he has to live, but he's got a certain amount of years to live, so he could live it up during this time. He could be a mercenary for hire, to kill for the highest bidder, and then 5 minutes before the end of his life, he'll repent. But he's admitting that he's not going to do teshuvah any point before that, because there's just no point. He's going to do teshuvah and then what? And then fail. So, if he dies an unnatural death, he's going to die without teshuvah and he's going to lose his portion in the world to come. So, according to this explanation, before we go back to our previous discussion, so, Tamus Nafshi Mos Yesharim means he just wants to die like a righteous Gentile. righteous Gentile has a portion in the world to come. So let's stop here for a second. And so far, we have a number of explanations of the words Tamas Nafshi Mos Yesharim. We started with the first explanation that this was a sign of whether he will die a natural death or an unnatural death will be a proof whether or not he gets a portion in the world to come. We had the Gemara in Avodah Zarah that says Yesharim means he wants to die like the Avos. We had the Ramban that Yesharim means he wants to die like Yeshurun, like the Jewish people. And then we had the two explanations of the Orach Chaim. Either he wanted to die Mos Yesharim, the death of those who go straight to Gan Eden, or Mos Yesharim just means the righteous of the world to come, of the nations of the world who do have a portion in the world to come. He wanted to die like them, but he knew that he was convinced that he was somehow beyond redemption unless God will help him and provide him with the opportunity or access to Teshuvah close enough to his death where he can't mess it up.
And he gives the blessings to the Jewish people instead of the curses that he wants to give, or that Balak wants him to give. Is Hashem forcing him to say this, or is he just accepting, okay, this is what Hashem wants, okay, I'm going to do it?
That's a good question. You have to look in the verses. I mean, the Gemara does seem to say that Hashem put a hook in his mouth, almost like he was speaking against his will. It's not so clear, but he certainly was not happy with what was happening, that's for sure.
Because, I mean, aside from this business with his donkey, I mean, what did he do that was so terrible that he doesn't deserve anything?
Well, he was a mercenary for hire. I think that's really he killed people by cursing them, regardless of how they were affiliated. It was a complete bipartisan, non-partisan. He was just whoever paid him the most money, he would curse their enemies. So that power of prophecy that God gave him, using it to murder, that's pretty bad. Along with his immorality and his greediness and his willingness to curse the Jewish people and his refusal to listen to the instructions of God, and we can pile on. Along with all of that, there was his murderous tendencies. So, but I'd like to take this a little bit deeper into try to understand who Bilam actually was. The Arizal asks a question. According to the Gemara, that says, the simple understanding of the Gemara, is that he was making a request that he wanted to die a natural death. Or according to the others, that say that he was praying to be like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, or he was praying to go straight to Gan Eden. Asks the Arizal, why would the Torah record Bilam's prayer? Especially if it wasn't fulfilled. Why do we recognize it? Why does it appear in the Torah? It's a silly, ridiculous request on the part of the most wicked man in the world to have a portion of the world to come like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why would the Torah even cite those words from him? We should mention all the blessings, the curses that turn into blessings. Some random, we don't state, the Torah is not telling you everything that Bilam said on that day. That's the Arizal's question. So Reb Tzadok HaKohen, in his Sefer Pri Tzaddik, has a fascinating explanation of this. He takes us back to the Mishnah we mentioned before, that says, Kol Yisrael yesh lam chelek la'olam haba. Every Jew has a portion in the world to come, except the following people have no portion in the world to come. And the Mishnah tells us there's 3 kings and 4 commoners that have no portion in the world to come. The 3 kings are Yeravam, Achav, Menashe. The 4 commoners, let's go do it in the order that the Mishnah says it, which is Bilam, Doeg, Achitophel, and Gehazi, chronological order. Those are the 4. Why does the Mishnah spend so much time? First of all, why does the Mishnah tell us at all that these 7 have no portion in the world to come? Secondly, why does the Mishnah have to describe for us 3 kings and 4 commoners as if we're dividing them into 2 categories? These are the 7 people. Is it important to us that there was 3 kings and 4 commoners?
He's the only Gentile, right?
He's the only Gentile.
So if you start the sentence, all Jews have a portion of the world to come, except this one Gentile?
Right. Exactly. And just even listing Bilam at all is difficult. because he isn't a Jew. You can't have an except with something that isn't part of the group. Right? You can't say all even numbers are divisible by 2 except 5. Right?
I learned from Rabbi Daniel Rocker that Bilam came back and he was the wife of Abigail.
Oh, we're gonna hopefully gonna get to Naval Carmeli. Yeah, Mr. Hashem, we'll get to him. Thank you. All right, so what else did you hear about that? Well, we're not gonna get too much into it. So
He repent. I guess he repented on Yom Kippur or something like that. On the last minute of his day, the last day of his life.
all right, so Mr. Hashem, we'll come back to Naval HaKarmeli, the first husband of Abigail, who was the wife of David. We'll come back to him soon. But what makes this even more difficult is the Gemara says, Dorshei Rishumos. Who these Dorshei Rishumos are is not so clear. But Dorshei Rishumos literally means those who expound on the markings, meaning that there are people who can derive things from a text. Then there's some people who can derive things from the erasure marks. So there are those who could derive from the erasure marks. They said, no. Kulam ba'in la'olam haba. They all come to the world to come. Yeravam, Achav, Menashe, they all have a portion in the world to come. How do we know? Because David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Li Gilad, Gilead is mine. Li Menashe, Menashe is mine. Ephraim Ma'oz Roshi, Ephraim is the head of my, the strength of my head. Yehuda Mechokiki, Yehuda is my scribe. Moav Sirachzi al Edom Ashdechnalai al Plesha Sisroi, whatever the verse there is referring to. So Li Gilad, that's a reference to Achav is mine, says God. I'm taking him back. You rabbis, you can expound as much as you want. Achav has no portion in the world to come. Li Gilad, Achav is mine. Menashe, Li Menashe refers to Menashe. Ephraim Ma'oz Roshi is Yeravam. Yehuda Mechokiki is Achitofel. Moav Sirachzi, that's Gechazi. Al Edom Ashnechnalai Zedoeg Ha'adomi. It lists 6 of them. Yeravam, Achav, Menashe, Doeg, Achitofel, Gechazi. A verse in Tehillim that says, God says, I'm sorry, guys, that's a beautiful Torah that you're darshaning in the first Mishnah in this chapter of Elu Ein Lam Chelik, but you guys don't get to make this decision.
Which Tehillah is this?
This is Tehillim Samach. So, it's fascinating that even though it remains in the Mishnah, that these have no portion in the world to come. But Dorshei Rishumos, those who expounded on the markings, they found that even though it looks like these 6 people have been erased, Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelik olam haba. That's why we could start off with Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelik olam haba, but these don't, because actually these do. Right. In fact, there's a more puzzling statement in the Gemara, where the Gemara says, listen to this. Bikshu od limnos echad. There was one more Jew that they wanted to count amongst those who have no portion in the world to come. The Gemara doesn't actually give his name, but we know who it is. Came this man, the one who they wanted to count, came his father and stood before them and said, I have a quote from my son in Mishlei. Meaning, this is David coming to defend his son Shlomo. Have you seen the man who is quick in his work? Before kings he shall stand, before darkness he shall not stand. Someone who built, first David came, then, I said this out of order. First David comes and tries to argue with them, but they didn't listen. Then Hashem came and quotes a verse in Mishlei and says that the one who built my temple, he built my temple more grand than he did his own home. He built my house faster than he built his own home. all this being examples of Shlomo's dedication to a service of Hashem. So he is with me. He does have a portion in the world to come. So God comes and argues with the rabbis who are trying to take Shlomo HaMelech out of Gan Eden, out of the world to come. And God says, I'm sorry, this is not. So they said, sorry, God, but we're the rabbis, we're the Sanhedrin, we get to decide, and he has no portion of the world to come.
Why are they picking on him?
Yeah, that's what
Yeah, good question, right? Why are these rabbis so adamant on... Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. Rabbi Tzaddik is going to answer that question. So God quotes to the sages a verse in Eov. Hami'imcha yishalmena? Have you got enough to cover that kind of expenditure? Are you going to replace someone, give me back someone, the equivalent of Shlomo? Right? Is it from you that this choice decision comes from? Ki ma'asta, that you should despise? Ki ata tivchar velo ani, and you should choose and not me? And at that point, the rabbis backed off, and Shlomo has a portion in the world to come.
What do you think is the idea of that the rabbis or the Sanhedrin are in charge of this world, but what makes them think they're in charge of the next world?
Somehow, it's Torah. This is Torah as to who has a portion of the world to come, and that's exactly where we're going to go now. So says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, it's clear that the rabbis knew there were 7. The rabbis knew there were 7 because there are 7 levels of holiness and the 7 levels of impurity. And just like there are 7 Jews, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, David, who reached the highest levels within each of these categories, we call them the Ishpizim, but they were connected to each of these 7 spheres that we work on during the days of sphere that we've discussed over the number of weeks. There's also 7 Jews at the bottom of each of those. 3 kings and some commoners. They assumed Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, that's Yeravam, Achav, Menashe. 3 kings, 3 kings. Then you have Doeg, Achitophel, and Gehazi. What's the 7th of the 7 spheres? Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. So the 7th needs to be a king as well. He needs to have some connection to Malchus, so he's either got to be king or someone else who leads by the words of his mouth. Because that's Malchus. Malchus is Peh, Malchus is related to the oral Torah. So they knew that it was some kind of power of speech or of controlling of the words of the mouth. So they said, who's a king who sinned enough that we haven't listed yet? Yeravam, Achav, Menashe. They're the top 3. Now who's at the bottom there? They said it's got to be Shlomo. So God says, I'm sorry, you can't just pick someone just because you need a 7th. There is someone who transgressed to that level, and maybe you need to find him, but it's not Shlomo. That's why it says only 3 kings, 4 commoners. It's not 4 kings and 3 commoners. So there's a debate going on where the rabbis throw their hands up in despair and say, well then who is it?
Why can't they put one of the other kings as the 7th?
There isn't any king who was significant enough in the harm that he did to deserve to be in that level.
But can't you switch one of the other kings?
Well, the top 3 are corresponding with Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. They have to be like king-like figures.
What did Shlomo do to be?
What?
What did Shlomo do?
Well, he had these foreign wives, and it's considered as if he worshipped idols, even though he didn't, but he allowed his wives to, and this other stuff. So they would... But God says, I'm sorry, no. You don't just, because you need a 7th, you can't just pick a 7th. So says Reb Tzadok, there in the back of the class is Bilam raising his hand saying, pick me. I'll be in place of Shlomo. I will be the leader by his mouth, the representation of Malchus in its most corrupted form, which is misusing his power to control through speech. The corruption, he's the evil advisor of Pharaoh, right? He will be the corruption. He says, I would like to be Mos Yesharim, representing the death of the Jews, of those who have no portion in the world to come. In fact, when you take those other ones back, it'll just be Bilam in the end, rotting for all seven. Tzadok HaKohen. Kol Yisrael yesh lam chelik la'olam haba. According to him, what the Mishnah is saying, that every Jew has a portion in the world to come. There was Dorsha Rishumos, they say that the other 6 out of those 7, they don't count. And all that's left is Bilam. So Bilam realized that the best accomplishment, the greatest accomplishment he could do is to rot in Gehenna forever, no portion in the world to come. Unlike even the righteous of the nations of the world, in Mos Yesharim, the death of the upright, so that because of him, now every Jew has a portion in the world to come. It's an interesting verse now. Who counts the dust of Yaakov? Who can even calculate the greatness of the Jewish people? They are so great, I wish to take the guillotine for them. And according to Reb Tzadok, he did. Amazing explanation. Gives us so much insight into what Bilam realizes at this moment. This is what we say that when Hagar joins with Avram, she said, better to be a maidservant in the house of Avram than to be the princess. And there are those people who said, better is the dung of the animals of Yitzchak than to be in the palace of Avimelech. Here we have the ultimate Bilam saying, Tamus nafshi mos yesharim, usihi acharisi kamahu, I'm going to take the end. I will be the only one left, as long as I can be listed amongst those Jews who have no portion in the world to come, even on the fake list, where I'm actually the only one attending that party. I want to be on a fake list of dead Jews who have no portion in the world to come.
So he felt that was the closest he could get to being a Jew.
Right.
He didn't think there was any other possibility.
He felt beyond redemption. He certainly was not interested in accepting 613 mitzvahs, even for 5 minutes of separating from his donkey. He was saying, listen, God, that I want you, I know I'm not coming to the party, but I want you to put me on the email list inviting people to the party, but the email list that actually gets sent back because it's sent to the wrong address, that's the email list I want to be on. Just to be on the list of the Jews. And he does. He gets listed in the Mishnah as having no portion in the world to come.
Why is that list better than having a portion in the Torah where he's the main character?
Well, being the bad guy in the Torah, I don't know if that earns him any reward.
But I mean,
if anything, I would say it makes his punishment worse.
He's looking for fame, because
we're saying no. He's looking for something deeper. He's looking for something real. He wants to somehow be connected to good, but he knows or feels he's beyond redemption. So he wants to be the rejection of the good. That's what we're saying. This is an insight that he's having during the prophecy. He says, these people are so great, what can I be that's like them? And he settles on what he thinks is the least significant aspect of being a Jew, which is to be listed on a list of Jews who have no portion in the world to come, even though he's actually the only one on the list. He'll take that.
Is there any other indication anywhere else that he was consciously thinking anything, or was similar, or was it only at that moment that the thought, the whole decision, all those conflicting factors, came?
Well, that's unclear. We don't know. I mean, throughout, he's experiencing prophecy here. He's giving all these blessings, so he has many deep ideas. Right. But this is where he makes this request, this personal prayer for himself. At that point, he's asking for something, and he had just described the greatness of the Jewish people, and he's asking to die like them. So we would understand that this is the moment that he took to make a personal request, hoping to get in and to at least have his nose under the under the roof or something.
Doesn't someone take his name and say it's Bali-am?
That's the next line in the
Oh,
in
okay,
our
go ahead.
discussion.
I was
Yeah.
just gonna say, so he's now, at the end of his life, hopefully, he thinks, acquiring a nation, even if.
Right, right. He's kind of being listed amongst the Jews,
Yeah.
even though it's a fake list. He's now technically on the list of Jews.
So here's like a personification of way that the dark side only takes energy from the good. It has no existence in its own. So he
Right.
understands that. He says his only reality is to take energy from that.
Right, to somehow survive as.
Otherwise, he's nothing.
Right.
Could there, I'm trying to give him some hope, could there be some type of, just feeling of nothingness compared to the, what there could be, kind of, a humble nothingness that he is saying.
Well, it seems not that way. It seems that it's more, he's wicked in the sense that he refuses to see that he can actually turn himself around to be a better person. In fact, we know what his eternal punishment is. The Gemara in Gittin tells us that he is forever in a boiling pot of male emission material. So that's forever. Perpetually, that's his punishment. So he has no portion of the world to come. He's not coming out of there, and somehow that's the fitting punishment for him. So, okay, but there is one more perspective here. That's the perspective of Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, the Ben Ish Chai. He's commenting on the Gemara that you just quoted, that says that why was his name Bilam? Because Bilam means below Am, he is without a people. He was peopleless. And that was part of his being a mercenary for hire, where whoever pays him the highest dollar. So he had no affiliation, had no connection, had no kind of feeling of connection to anyone, because he literally would kill anyone for the right price. And that's the simple understanding. But the Ben Ish Chai says, that we've discussed this over the months. I hope I have enough time to get through this full explanation. But as we know, that all of Sefer Bereshis, underlying the whole Sefer, is the story of the souls of the Jewish people. 600,000 souls who will emerge in Parshas Shemos. When at that point the 600,000th Jew is born, at that moment, Hashem says to Moshe, according to some, Moshe is the 600,000, according to some, he's the first of the 600,000, whatever, however it is, at some point when the right number of Jews were born that were fixed. At that point, Hashem says to Moshe, go get my people. But for those 600,000 souls to make it to Egypt, it was a very long and difficult journey. So we discussed it then, that originally the 600,000 souls were contained within Adam Rishon. And then at his sin they were dispersed. Much of it was dispersed in Egypt. But it was really throughout the world. 600,000 souls appeared in the generation of the flood, and they were punished, and they were suffered, and they all ended up dying. Then 600,000 people were dispersed when the Tower of Babel. 600,000 people were killed in Sodom, and those are the 600,000 babies who are thrown in the water, or the 600,000 souls of the Mabul, and the 600,000 people who were pressed into the walls were the 600,000 of the Tower of Babel. All these, there was a whole process. But at one point, Yaakov is sent down to go do his part in this process of reclamation of the souls. So he goes to visit the custodian of the keys to the dark side. The person who's doing most at that time in the world to contain and subdue the 600,000. Arami Oved Avi. the Aramean who pursued my father, who tried to kill everyone, was because Lavan was in control of these 600,000 souls, and Yaakov gets them not only by taking Rachel and Leah, but Yaakov leaves Lavan's house with 600,000 sheep. Those 600,000 sheep are not Jews, but they are the keys to accessing the 600,000 sparks. Again, this is all in the writings, the holy writings. This is what they say. Lavan is trying to fight Yaakov on every step for every sheep, because he is helpless to watch as Yaakov reclaims soul after soul. And as he's doing this, another son is born. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, until he has 11. And then he has Binyamin on the way. He's trying to come after Yaakov to kill him. He needs to stop this. He's been trying for years to try to subdue him. 7 years with this and trying to keep him busy, not collecting the sheep. But eventually Yaakov leaves with all the sheep. There's one tradition that tells us, ever here mentioned, it's in the Torah, that when Lavan pursues after Yaakov, who's coming with Lavan? It's mentioned in the Torah, his sons. Who are his sons? So according to the Yonasan ben Uziel, Lavan had a son called Bilam. Bilam is the son of Lavan. So if you can imagine, Bilam is this young boy who hates his brother-in-law, who's taking all the sheep and all the business and having so much success, and they're constantly being fed by their father, Lavan, that this is the trickster. Because the greatest sign of an Aramean, of an Arami, Lavan Arami, which is a mixed up word for Ramai, because he is the world's greatest trickster. In fact, if you, in The Merchant of Venice, Shylock actually calls out the people who are calling him a filthy Jew. What?
How old was Bilam when he died?
We'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that Bilam's age in a second. So Shylock actually says to this guy, in The Merchant of Venice, he says, like your grandfather Laban tried to steal from my grandfather Yaakov. This became the symbol for this struggle, and it goes all the way back there. So Lavan is chasing after Yaakov, and Bilam is ready. We're finally going to get brother-in-law Yaakov. We're going to take back what's ours. Except Lavan has, what is this? A dream in the night, where God says to him, "You shall do nothing to these people." Bilam, little boy, doesn't have this vision. Right? It says Mitov Adra.
From good to bad. But
Right.
you can start from bad to good. That's what he started. He started fighting and this, and then he said, let's make shalom.
Right? So
Exactly what Hashem told.
but it's a dream that Lavan has. Bilam does not. So the next day he's ready to fight, and Lavan shows up and instead makes this covenant with Yaakov. They put up a mound. You don't cross this line, you don't cross that line, and they all go back. Bilam is outraged. He can't wait till the day when he gets a chance to take the vengeance from Yaakov. And there he comes, ready to come, and God appears to him in a dream and says, no. Bilam is one of the advisors of Pharaoh to wipe out the Jewish people, because he knows he himself can't really do much, but he can advise Pharaoh, he can advise Pharaoh to try to diminish the Jewish people from growing. He says, when the Jewish people, the first 130 years that they're there, the first 130 years is when all the bad, the junk, was removed from the Jewish people. He said Bilam became the custodian, again, of all the junk. Instead of his father Lavan, who had all the good, Bilam became the container for all the evil of the Jewish people. So he was just through this process of Egypt becoming more and more wicked, to the point where he becomes the great advisor, gives Pharaoh the plan to throw the babies into the water. The problem is, says the Ben Ish Chai, that the Gemara tells us, there's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, that says, Anshe damim umerma, lo yachzu liyamehem, that men of deceit don't live half their lives. Because Bilam died at the age of 33. That's what the Gemara says. Asks the Ben Ish Chai, what? Bilam 33? How does he die in year 39 in the wilderness? At the age of 33, after being possibly the son of Lavan. According to some, there's one opinion in the Gemara here that says that Beor was Lavan Arami, right? Bilam ben Beor. Beor is another word for Lavan. So how is he the son of Lavan? How is he an advisor of Pharaoh? And how does he die in the Midbar at the age of 33? Yeah? So, says the Ben Ish Chai, and you have to be the Ben Ish Chai to be able to say this, he says that we have to introduce the concept of Gilgul.
That's what I wondered.
Right. Gilgul has different definitions, and we would require a whole class just to define this exactly. But he says basically there's two major ways of Gilgul. When we say Gilgul, many people misunderstand. It's not reincarnation in the literal sense where the person comes back. But rather, the best way to understand this in most cases, though not every Gilgul is like this, is basically like this. Every person is, your body is a candle, and who you are is the wick, and your wick is going to be lit from another candle. It doesn't diminish that previous candle, but it is the same flame from that candle continuing on in another place. So your neshama can be lit. That's called basically Gilgul Meileda, from birth. But there's sometimes that's for a certain purpose. A certain soul from ancient times will attach itself to a person in order to experience or to go through part of its punishment or part of its fixing. This is why we say the souls of Nadav and Avihu came into Pinchas. That's why he becomes a Kohen. All these other, but sometimes that can happen later on. So he says, Ben Ish Chai, I don't know where he knows this, but Ben Ish Chai knows everything. I know nothing, so I'm just going to repeat what he says. Ben Ish Chai says that when a person receives a Gilgul Mechayim, they receive a soul that becomes attached to them. That's considered a new birth for that person, and that person is assessed a new sand timer. Every person has a sand timer for how long they're going to live. When the person gets this new, because there's a certain amount of punishment and suffering that a new soul has to go through. So he says that Bilam was an old man, but Lavan needed to suffer alongside with Bilam. And so 6 years, I guess, into the Jewish people being in exile, Bilam receives this soul, and then he is allotted 70 years.
The soul of Lavan.
The soul of Lavan. So he's allotted 70 years. And he was going to die a natural death after 70 years. And then that soul would have been fixed. But because he chooses to sin, he dies instead at the age of 33. Says the Ben Ish Chai, that's why the covenant between Yaakov and Lavan is a mound, which Lavan calls Yegar Sahadusa. What does Yaakov call it? Gal Eid. He says Gal is the 33. So Yaakov is telling him, don't cross this line, because Gal Eid, if you try to attack the Jewish people, you will die at the age of 33. Bilam knows this and says, if I could somehow make it to 70, then he will die Mos Yesharim, because the soul would have been fixed. He's on that level, of this high level of being the challenge to Yaakov Avinu. So he thinks Tamus Nafshi Mos Yesharim, if he's somehow part of this fixing process, he can correct that soul. He can be on that level. This is all what the Ben Ish Chai says.
When he was killed by Moshe, that's already 200-300 years later.
Who, Pinchas?
No, Bilam.
Yeah, Bilam is killed by Pinchas in the war with Midian.
Yeah.
Right.
Moshe Rabbeinu.
Moshe Rabbeinu kills Og. Right, Pinchas kills.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it's already 200-300 years later.
Right, but he's saying that no, but this wasn't.
I know, you wanna say that he killed his Gilgul, it is the Neshama, or he somehow...
Right, so right now, this life that he's living now, he's only 33 years old. This is what Ben Ish Chai says. So he says that's why Lavan is not fixed. That's why he has to come back as the first husband of Abigail, Naval, Nun Beis Lamed, same letters as Lavan, who is also corrupt and confused and is also holding on to the wife of the true fixing of the world, which comes through David. Naval is holding on to Abigail, much like Lavan is holding on to Rachel and Leah. So, by the way, Rachel is, of course, related to Michal, and Shaul and Leah to Abigail, but that's a whole subject on its own. The point is, though, that there's a whole underlying theme. So says the Ben Ish Chai, when he says, Tamus Nafshi Mos Yesharim, what he was asking for, he says, listen, I'm hopeless. But God, please find a way, that in the end, that somehow this soul, because he's being dragged around from soul to soul, to lifetime, given all these challenges and powers, and he says, can't you just fix it? And in the end, perhaps, with the way Naval approaches it, that in the end, whether he did teshuvah, didn't do teshuvah, so in the end, he gets fixed through all the suffering which he goes through. But according to the Ben Ish Chai, when it says Bilam was below Am, it means that originally he was to be part of this control of the 600,000, but he was separated. He became the junk. He was removed. He wasn't even the Am. Which, by the way, according to some traditions, the two leaders of the Erev Rav were Yunus and Yumbrus, or as were that was their Egyptian names. Their Hebrew names were Yochanan and Mamre when they decided to join the Jewish people. That they were the leaders of the Erev Rav, the two sorcerers, the two warlocks who were the sons of Bilam. Another discussion on its own. But Bilam wasn't even there. He was below Am, completely separate. And that's why he's hoping somehow that because of this connection to the Jewish people, he should have some right to be connected to the Jewish people. And in the end, the most he gets for himself is that he gets to be on the list of those that are Einam Chelik L'Olam Haba. To add one little musar at the end, which is that all of this, as you can see, is a result of someone who wants the easy way out. He wants to somehow receive, or as the language of the Gemara is, he wants to do actions like Zimri and wants to receive the reward like Pinchas. This is someone who, rather than to work on himself, try to push himself for change, and he goes to such lengths and such depths to try to do so. May we merit that we find a straighter path, and remember that Kol Yisrael Yesh Lam Chelik L'Olam Haba.
Do we know exactly